Firstly, and maybe most importantly, he has a Master's of Science in Exercise and Nutrition, graduated from the University of Tampa in 2016. He is a adjunct professor there. We'll go over that bio in a second. He also got his Bachelor of Science in Athletic Training from Stony Brook University in 2015 and has his athletic trainer certification and is a certified sports nutritionist. Chris is also a graduate of the Exercise and Nutritional Science firstly, he is a graduate of the Exercise and Nutritional Science Master's Program at the University of Tampa, an adjunct professor teaching various courses on nutrition, exercise fundamentals, and supplementation. He is also a published scientist who continues to study how to optimize body composition through training and nutritional interventions under Dr. D'Souza in the Human Performance Lab. Chris is also a competitor himself with 3 contest prep seasons under his belt. He started competing as a teenager in 2011 and was successful out of the gate, winning his novice bantamweight class as well as the teen division in the INBF Long Island Experience. He then competed in 2013 and won the open lightweight and juniors division at the INBF Northeast America. In 2017, Chris competed at the 2017 NPC Tampa Bay Classic, where he won his classic physique class and open middleweight class. He then competed in his home turf at the 2017 INBF Hercules Championships, where he finished second in the open lightweight class. He then flew across the country to California to compete at the INBF Muscle Mayhem and also finished second place in the open lightweight class there. Sorry, that was a handful. Anyways, Chris, we're pumped to have you on. Thanks for taking the time to do that.
Guys.
And did we miss anything there?
No, that was more than enough. I really appreciate it. And saying INBF like 6 times can be a tongue twister.
Yeah, I was like, man, this is a lot. So we have a bunch of questions for Chris. He is a specialist, obviously, when it comes to a lot of areas, particularly nutrition, and because he has his master's degree in exercise science and then also has an athletic training certification, you kind of have all of your bases covered, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, man, I'm really grateful for the foundation I have, I guess I would say. Originally, I thought I was going to go into physical therapy, and I actually worked in PT clinics for 6 years. I worked, since I was literally 18 as an assistant, as an intern, and then as an aide, and then as an athletic trainer. So I worked at PT clinics before I had any educational background, and then as an ATC. So I was in that realm for a while. It was something I'm super passionate about, but I just didn't want to do that, day in and day out, and really fell in love with bodybuilding. So shifted gears and went everything exercise and nutritional science based thereafter. So yeah, man, I'm super grateful for the foundation I have, and I'm someone who just is continuously trying to learn. I feel like you get to a certain point, especially at the beginning, you feel like you actually know everything. And then,
Yeah,
1,000%. And there comes this point where your ass gets humbled really quick, and you're like, wow, there's so many more questions that we have that I want to explore, and that's what I'm really grateful to do in the research realm.
Yeah, that's awesome. I ironically, and myself, or coincidentally maybe, Isaiah and I both initially went in for, I think Isaiah was mechanical engineering and then switched to exercise science also for PT. And I think so many people go into PT being told like, oh, this is like the best option because it gives you the most job security, and you've also have the benefit of working with athletes, and you get to be around sport and all stuff. And then it's reality. You're like teaching 60-year-old women how to like stand up and sit down that are maybe overweight, or like dealing with 70-year-olds with like knee and hip replacements or whatever. So it's just very different, I think, than what people assume it is. And I think that pushes a lot of people when they start to get into it, and you start to get those hours and stuff like that even, and you're like, you know what, this isn't what I want to do. When I was coaching, it was the same way. It was like Groundhog's Day. You're like in, out, same thing every day. It's like teaching a lesson in history about Abraham Lincoln like 15 times a day every day for 365 days. Like, is just way overboard. Ironically as well, my cousin was an AT for the Ravens. Wow. So getting his experience from that as well, and kind of hearing, what it's like at that level, and the time commitments and stuff like that are crazy. And then obviously like in exercise science, you have a lot of people like that too. So we'll cover the advertisements at the end, because I want to get right into it here. But we have a bunch of questions here. Hunter you are kind of our go-to guy for nutrition, and I'm sure you're going to have better questions maybe than what I will. I'm sure I will have questions as we go through here. But Hunter, if you want to lead it off with kind of your first question for Chris,
Yeah,
I think
Chris,
that would be good.
something, a little bit of background about me is I played Division I baseball at Tulane University down in New Orleans, which is where I am now. And I was always obsessed with nutrition and maximizing performance at Tulane. My strength and conditioning coach there was a former Olympian. And so I was always picking his brain, like, how do you eat? How do you train? How do you do all this? And it was always just like, Hunter, just do what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
And so I was always hurt. And when I stopped playing, it just like, I started plowing through the research. And I remember Mike Matthews was the first one that kind of kicked off like there's like real science behind this. And from there, like, it's just been devouring like podcasts and papers and textbooks about metabolism and exercise science. So something that I am currently fascinated with is the state of research on like maximizing performance for athletic events. And I know that that's like a catch-all term, athletic events. You have everything from a 100-meter dash to a marathon and everything in between. I know that you mainly focus, or at least I assume that you mainly focus with bodybuilders and physique competitors. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's definitely my primary focus, but I actually have a huge interest in different sports, even things like MMA performance. So even though I don't make a ton of content on that, my brother was a pro MMA fighter and he coaches in that realm. So I dabble in other things, but I don't like put that stuff on social media. It's just not my niche, but I love that stuff. So yeah, performance overall, it's way more than just resistance training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Chris. You're in
I'm
Tampa,
in Tampa,
you said,
Florida
right?
now. Yeah, I'm from Long Island, New York.
Okay, so are you familiar with Steve Mowry? Do you know who Steve Mowry is?
No.
He's a MMA guy from around my hometown, but I thought he trained out in Tampa, and I was like, maybe
He
you know who
might.
this
So
guy
I
is.
know the MMA scene in the Northeast. So New York, Long Island, New Jersey, Connecticut, that whole scene I'm way more familiar with than the MMA scene down here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah, he's from Butler, PA, which is like just north of
Gotcha.
Pittsburgh. But yeah, maybe check him out after the episode. Steve, if you're listening to this, what's up? Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Anyways, Hunter, I guess you never really directed your question. Did you have a question specifically related to that? I'm starting to list a bunch out here. So.
Yeah. So MMA, I recently just started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai. So we'll touch on that in a second, I'm sure, because I'm fascinated with that realm because
I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, John is.
It's interrupting with his regular training volume and my plans, but
so
fine.
I would love to start off with a little bit about how you approach maximizing an athletic performance from a nutritional standpoint. So if you have an athlete come to you, and let's just start off, most of our athletes are track and field and basketball. Okay. So if you were to have let's just start off with a basketball athlete who comes to you and says, I've heard that oatmeal before games, the go-to, you got to have fast-acting carbs. So like, how many packets of oatmeal should I eat before a game? Because that's a lot of the questions that I field. How do you take that and start to build out some sort of nutritional blueprint or guideline for an athlete, knowing that their knowledge point or their starting point is just, I need carbs?
Sure. So there's a lot I can talk about, and I'm just going to kind of rant off.
Oh, please.
It's going to be valuable. So.
Yep.
Oh, that's what I always. Don't worry.
Go. I'm super excited.
That's what this podcast is.
Man. So obviously context is super important. A lot of sports are weight dependent. So, let's say you take wrestling or gymnastics or even cheerleading, MMA, whatever it may be. Depending on what phase they're in, the level of importance their peri-workout nutrition is going to serve for their performance or recovery is going to make a big difference. So if you have somebody who is in a weight loss kind of realm and they're in a caloric deficit, their pre-workout nutrition is going to be way more important compared to somebody who's been maintaining their body weight or even gaining a little body weight, and they're constantly kind of in this full glycogen state where they have plenty of energy reserves. All right, so if you have full glycogen levels and you're not extremely lean, like an unhealthy level of leanness, You should be able to do like a 30 to 45-minute bout and perform really well without getting too caught up in like, what is my pre-workout nutrition looking like, okay? But on the other end of the spectrum, if you're trying to maximize your performance, that's when all of these variables start coming into play. It can be hard to contextualize how much should somebody eat, because it's also going to depend on like how much they're eating throughout the 24-hour window. But a really good recommendation for pre-workout nutrition is about 1 gram of carbs per kilogram of total body weight. So let's just say you have a 70 kg athlete. Having around 70 grams of carbs in that pre-workout meal is probably going to be a sweet spot. For more endurance-based athletes, it can go as high as 3 grams per kilogram. So if you have like a cross-country athlete or something like that, you want to make sure that you're fueling them with a lot more glucose and carbohydrate depending on what they're doing. But then it also comes down to what food sources are you eating and how long before the training session are you consuming that food. So for example, if I eat something like 70 grams of carbs from something like sweet potato, that's going to sit in my stomach for quite a while, and it's a much slower digesting carb compared to something like cream of rice that is going to be digested way, way faster, or even something like a Rice Crisp cereal or some sort of cereal-based carbohydrate that can be broken down really quick. So you got to take these things into consideration. When it comes to pre-workout nutrition, even though you can have a faster digesting carb, I still recommend utilizing lower glycemic sources, so you're not getting a massive influx in blood glucose levels too quickly, and therefore when that does happen, you have a much quicker crash of blood glucose levels, and a lot of people can kind of go hypoglycemic while they're exercising, and they crash and they fatigue in the middle of their bout, and that's the last thing you want. So utilizing a lower glycemic carbohydrate can be really beneficial, as well as potentially adding some sorts of fat and maybe a little bit of fiber to slow down that digestion and give you more stable blood glucose levels, just so you have a stable source of energy throughout your session, rather than kind of having that rapid spike in blood glucose and a rapid drop while you're in the middle of exercise.
Yeah, much of what you said was like flashback from my master's degree class when I was in nutrition. I was like, that's right. You take the fat, you take the protein with it, it slows digestion. My mentor always used to say this when I would ask him about nutrition and protein intake, just talking about how fast you can, I guess, digest it and have whatever macronutrients broken down and used in the blood. He's like, it's very different if you take in a protein shake versus if there's a protein shake that was just put inside your stomach versus a chunk of steak. He's like, that's very different in terms of how fast your body is going to be able to break that down and get it in the bloodstream, whatever, locally, take it to wherever area systemically that it needs to be used, and then utilized. Like, it's very, very different. So one of the questions I actually had about protein intake was this question of timing and when it should be taken in. I think previously we had thought, you have to get this post-workout window, you know what I mean, this like hour or two where
the anabolic window.
The anabolic window where you're optimally going to be muscle protein synthesis is going to occur to a higher degree over the course of whatever hours of time after you do that. So it's really important that you do that, and you need to take it in with a little bit of sugar so that you co-transport protein in better and all this different stuff. And now it's kind of like, yeah, actually that shit was wrong. Like, just get the protein you need in a day. What is your lens on that? Like, has that changed? Is that what's kind of the correct way to view it? Does the timing matter? Does that window exist?
I would say the window actually does exist. And I'll kind of explain the level of importance and who really needs to take these things into consideration. Going back to what you said, like the difference between a whey protein shake and a piece of steak, totally different. So if you have 30 grams of whey isolate, your amino acid levels in your blood plasma should actually peak at around 60 minutes post-consumption. Whereas if you're having a piece of steak, that's going to take 3 to 5 hours to fully digest, and that's just massively different, right? And then even taking 30 grams from something like fish compared to steak is different. And then even looking at like ground beef compared to like an actual sirloin steak is totally different too, because you have so much more surface area, so you're going to break that down way quicker. Mm-hmm. So all these things do matter. Another thing that impacts digestion rates is, again, depending on those athletes. Like if you're looking at like athletes that do perform in weight classes and they are cutting, you will hear athletes say, when I'm in a cut, I'm hungry way more frequently, and I feel like I digest my food faster. And you actually do to a certain extent. Your body prioritizes digestion because you need those nutrients coming in because you've been in an energy deficit for so long. So those nutrients are way more important at that time compared to when your energy reserves are full, glycogen levels are full, body fat percentage is higher. Your body doesn't care about digesting all this food as quickly because it just doesn't need it as important, right? So that's another thing to consider. Going to the anabolic window, it really does exist. I know a lot of people in the evidence-based realm just say, hey, as long as you get in a sufficient amount of protein per day, you're fine. Again, if you're just looking for like average results, yeah, you are going to be fine. And it is more important to consume an adequate amount of protein than it is to get in 30 grams of protein post-workout, right? So let's just say you have someone that's under eating their protein for the entire day, but they are hitting the anabolic window. They would be better off actually getting a sufficient amount of protein on a daily basis. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, if you have someone consuming a sufficient amount of protein per day, but they're not paying any attention at all to their post-workout nutrition, and they're getting in that protein feeding 2 hours post-workout instead of 30 minutes post-workout, they're actually leaving some room on the table for maximizing the recovery process, because your ability to spike protein synthesis to the greatest degree is highest post-workout, and you are more sensitive to drive in more carbohydrate into the cells that you actually need it. So again, if someone's like tripping over the post-workout window, but they're not even tracking their total protein intake, they're doing something wrong. And then same thing, it could be vice versa. There's no like black and white yes and no, but there's this huge gray spectrum that people need to really pay attention to.
And this brings me to something that I try to hammer home with a lot of our athletes. It's that I feel like the community has gone backwards from being so focused on these small minutia into like we're kind of swinging the pendulum back into like, well, just generally hit this and generally do that, and you should generally be fine. But a lot of our athletes are working out 2 times per day. So they'll do a weight training session, and then they'll have a basketball practice or a game. And something I try to drive home is, so you might hear that you're going to replenish your glycogen stores over the 24-hour period, and you'll be fine. But for you in particular, post your first exercise bout, you really need to focus on reuptake of a pretty sizable amount of carbs is what I tell them. Not so much to where like you can't move because you're stuffed, but you should be consuming protein and a good amount of carbs within a 1-hour window post-exercise to make sure that you have re-upped those stores so that you're ready for your second bout of training later on in the afternoon. How important do you think that truly is for an 18-year-old athlete who may have that weight training session in the morning and then be expected to go 100% for a basketball practice in the afternoon?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, especially what you said with just the space as a whole, kind of, 10 years ago being so focused on the minutia and the details, and now everyone's like, oh, none of it matters, and it's not true. Like, it does matter, just...
That's refreshing to hear. That's very refreshing to hear, because you hear both sides.
It's very annoying. It's a pet peeve
often
of mine, man. It absolutely does matter, but the percentage points that you want to assign to the minutia shouldn't outweigh the percentage points that you're giving to the entire context. And there are people, like, you can go to a regular commercial gym and you'll hear someone talk about minutia when they don't have their foundation in place. But once you...
They don't even eat their vegetables.
Exactly. Once you do have your foundation in place, if you want to improve, that's when you start focusing on the details. Just the details don't matter for those that aren't paying attention to the foundation, but the details do matter to people who are trying to optimize performance. So going back to your question about the basketball athletes, it's very important for them to have a high carbohydrate meal post resistance training if they are doing 2-a-days and they have a basketball session later. In that situation, you can use a reference range of like 1.5 to 2 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So again, you have a 60 kilo basketball player, they should consume around 120 grams post-workout. So they're ready to go for their basketball session later on. And their ability to resynthesize glycogen is enhanced post-training. So if they're not doing that, again, they're just missing out on an opportunity where their body's in this hypersensitized state.
Okay.
Yeah. What's actually funny is like you talking about all this takes me back specifically to grad school where I was training. I mean, I was I guess a professor at the time, a GA, and teaching 3 or 4 courses, taking 2 or 3 courses as well, and then also training a lot. And I was at a spot where there was an Olympic training site for weightlifting, like clean and jerk and snatch. And those guys, and there was actually wrestlers as well, like Greco-Roman training for the Olympics. And you're talking about the best junior athletes in those respective sports in the country coming to BF, middle of nowhere, basically Canada, like cold as hell to just train. Kind of gives you Rocky vibes. But during that time, I would always make sure to do everything that you just said. So it was, okay, an hour before my session, I'm making sure I'm taking in a substantial amount of carbohydrates so that I have fuel throughout that session, and then basically sandwiching the workout with those 2 nutrition periods, you know what I mean? Taking in some protein and carbohydrates beforehand. If I can stomach taking in some protein during the session, well, it's going to be more readily available after the session, so maybe I'll take in some protein during the session because there is that digestive window, and then maybe after the session or through whatever, I'd take my protein shake. Then I would take in a lot of carbohydrates because I would actually eat my biggest meal after that session, that 2-hour session, because I knew that I had just depleted it, and I knew that I was more sensitive to reuptake. And I would take in a lot of protein with it and everything else, maybe usually a shake with spinach, peanut butter, protein powder, kale. I would put in milk, just literally this caloric macronutrient slush. It was disgusting. I would just like chug it down, and we had to track like how many calories we were taking in. And I think that meal typically would, like that meal afterwards, just with everything that I would put in it, was excessive. Like it was like 1,000 to 1,500 calories just in that slush because there was so much fat and protein, like carbs thrown in it. But yeah, it's just interesting to hear you say now. And then I got away from that because life stressors, everything else came in the way, and I was like, I don't have the luxury of just training full time as much anymore. Now I do have that luxury again, but I'm not as much in the habit of doing that because 1, I fast, and 2, I've heard all over the board, what you should and shouldn't be doing. And I was like, well, I'm just going to make sure I get my protein intake in. I'm going to make sure I eat my vegetables. I'm going to make sure I get my carbohydrate intake in and take my vitamins and make sure I take my, whatever else supplements I'm taking, and just make sure I'm doing that. So it's kind of interesting to hear, like, in terms of how important it actually is. Like, if you could give it a percentage point and say, if you've got your big rocks covered, you're taking in the right amount of carbohydrates a day, you're taking your micronutrients in the form of vitamins and minerals, and then vegetables as well, and you're taking in enough calories. How important is it to start getting the timing in terms of, like, if you could give it a percentage point, what sort of increase are you going to see, and where are you going to see that change? Is it hypertrophy? Is it energy levels? Is it neural function? Where are you going to see those changes?
It's a little bit of everything. It's hard for me to put a percentage point, but I'll relay something to you that you might find interesting in regards to the research and why people say it's not that important. Okay. You might look at studies comparing, let's just say nutrient timing, because that's kind of what we're talking about, right? The importance of like a post-workout window. And let's just say people in the space are saying, oh, it doesn't really matter. They're saying that because there was no statistical significance in these studies. Okay. Now, this study might have been 6 weeks long or 8 weeks long or 10 weeks long. Sometimes, even though that these studies are reporting no statistical significance between groups, so somebody focused on, post-workout nutrition versus those that are just consuming the same macronutrients and getting in an adequate amount of total nutrition per day, there might be a small trend and there might be an effect size that is favoring the nutrient timing group, okay? So if you extend that study that was 8 weeks long to 16 weeks long, it may have been statistically significant if it was just a longer study, okay? So when you're taking, when you're taking athletes that you're working with for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, those small details can add up over time. So again, you need to ask yourself or the clients you're working with and just understand the demographic that you're dealing with and say, how important is it to them to either maximize their results or, get 90% of the results with less effort so it's more sustainable, right? If you have a competitive athlete that the most important thing to them is winning, then they should do every single thing that they can do, because that's really what they care about. Like, that is their priority. Now, if you have someone else that, you know, has 3 kids, works 50 hours a week, has a commute to work, and you're telling them to do all this nonsense, they'll just be like, dude, I have a life that I need to focus on, and like, I can't be a full-time nutrition and exercise nut, right?
And
so
then,
you have to kind of understand what makes sense for each individual, and then prioritize what's going to move the needle the most for that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, it's like maximizing.
yeah, something that I like to relate to them is I have some athletes that come to me and they're doing absolutely nothing and they want to go to 100 overnight. And I'm like, look, like, go read Atomic Habits by James Clear and get an understanding that to change something, you start with what you can actually accomplish and build up to it. Because like you said, if I throw the kitchen sink at you, and now on top of all the other life stressors you now have to monitor every carb, every fat, every protein, the timing that you intake those macronutrients, what's your supplementation regimen like, how much sleep are you getting? It's like, I've just added so much stress to your life that now we're going backwards. Even if you get these things right now, you're going to be so stressed, so chronically stressed that you're not doing everything perfect that we may have just actually hurt you.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally agree.
I mean, anyway, I think it's like such a fascinating space with athletes, because you're like walking the fine line between how much can they take, like how much are you giving them, and then like how much can they actually monitor and progress with. So
yeah,
I don't know.
That's like one of the things that I will frequently say is, what can you handle when I look at my athletes? Like, I'm like, yeah, I try to push the needle as far as I can. Like, realistically, how much can you handle? I will give you the same training that if you can handle it, I'll give you the same training that I would give to someone that is training to run the 100-meter dash in under 10 seconds. But can you handle that volume? Is that volume appropriate for you? Or are you going to get hurt? Like, realistically, outside of all that stuff, though, assuming that stuff is they can do it, mentally, how much can you take? Like, what is your resiliency for and your compliance for this? What is your threshold for the bullshit, quote unquote? How long can you handle it? Because it's going to pay off. It might take, like you said, 16, 32, whatever, a full year of time, but it's going to be better than you not having done that in the first place. But it's like a war of attrition. Like, you just have to stay the course and handle it, and then you're going to get better. And Isaiah's seen that happen. Hunter's seen it happen. I tell my athlete, like, in our field, and I'm sure it's the same as you have these instant, immediate claims. Train with me for 8 weeks and you'll jump 8 inches higher, or do this program and you'll jump higher than you will on anything else. Like, people just, it's what's fast, it's what's easy, it's instant gratification, and it's not realistic. You know, I mean, to get better, it's delayed gratification. You got to put the time in, you got to do everything right, and that's how you get better. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. And obviously, like you said, you got to maximize and control what you can with people, and you have to ask yourself, like, what's realistic? You know, I can't ask this guy in my case to do 10 by 10 squats. It's not realistic. Like, it's just not going to happen. And definitely controlling that. One thing I did want to jump into, kind of to change topics here and switch gears, is this question that, Hunter, you asked, because this is something I'm very interested in, which is the reverse dieting. My roommate right now is actually trying to lose weight, and Hunter was kind of like guiding him through that process. So I guess, Chris, do you have experience with reverse dieting? What's your opinion on it? And what's the interplay between eating more and your metabolism increasing, and then how you manipulate that to long-term lose weight?
Can I just add one thing, Chris? And it's the ability to so I've worked with a nutritionist, and their spin on it is, let's actually start at the lowest caloric intake possible, and let's slowly work it so that the end of your diet is when you're maximizing caloric intake. And then let's see how much we can push the calories above your previous maintenance while remaining weight stable. And so, like, their analogy is, too many people try to figure out or kind of back themselves into a corner of running on as little calories as possible, instead of trying to figure out how many calories can we eat and still be the weight that you want to be.
Gotcha. Yeah, it depends how you approach it. Hunter, the way you mentioned it, are you saying, like, you start a fat loss phase really aggressively and then immediately start reverse dieting and see?
So it'd be a very slow process of starting at the lowest caloric intake you think that you would want to get to, and then week by week, you know, you may add 50 calories, and then you're monitoring your weight the whole time, and you're seeing, like, are we still losing weight? Yeah. And so something that I've actually had success with, where I had a previous maintenance of 3,100 calories roughly, and now I'm up to almost 3,600, but I'm also almost 10 pounds less than where I was prior. And so it's been like a very eye-opening experience. Before, I would start with as many calories as possible and still lose weight, and then you slowly reduce. But now I see the benefit in maybe starting really low and working yourself back up.
Yeah.
How do you not just tug the other direction and fuck up your metabolism by doing that, though? Like, if I just drop down to 2,000 calories, my body's going to be like, yep, here's a baseball bat. I'm just going to knock your head off. Like, you're fucked for months. Like, is that realistic to do? And how do you know where to even start for that point?
When I typically use the term reverse dieting, I typically utilize it after someone has already gone through their fat loss phase. They're in a very lean position and they now want to transition into a lean bulk or some sort of metabolic rebuild and get their calories higher and kind of reestablish a new body fat set point. But what Hunter mentioned is kind of what I do when I do aggressive mini cuts. So if I want to cut someone down in like 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, I usually start off aggressive and then each week add in a couple, depends on the person, but I add in calories weekly or bi-weekly depending on how they're responding, and essentially have them lose weight for 6 to 8 weeks as an example, but they were in the largest deficit right off the bat. And the reason I do that is because they're in the beginning, when their body fat percent is higher, they have the lowest risk to lose any sort of lean body mass. So I kind of maximize fat loss at first. Losing lean mass isn't really at a high risk, and then just kind of reverse them from there. But when I reverse clients after fat loss phases, I do see them, have the ability to reestablish a higher caloric intake than they previously were at when they were like at their previous maintenance, at their previous set point. And then oftentimes their new set point is a leaner physique than their previous set point was. So it's basically that the set point being the percentage of fat that they have and the amount of calories they need to take in to maintain that percentage of fat. So if I'm 8%, and let's say I take in 3,000 calories at 8%, you do this reverse dieting, now I can stay 8% at 3,500 calories or whatever else. Exactly.
Correct. So I would come. So if I'm my roommate scenario, I'd be like, all right, you're 25. Let's bring you down to, I don't know what's realistic, but let's bring you down to 15 or whatever else, or and then from there we'll reverse diet you back up so that let's say you're at 15% and you're consuming 2,500 calories or whatever else at 15%, and we'll bring you back up. So now you're at 15%, but you're taking in 3,000 calories or whatever else. Do you just keep doing that process up, down? Like, would you bring them back down at that point? It
depends on their goal and like how they're looking, if they still have more fat to lose and whatever it may be. I have a client right now that I'm working with. I took him down from 190 to, now he's like 156. But he was maintaining his body weight at 3,500 calories at 190. Now he's actually eating like 3,750 at 156. And it's just like, that's one of the most extreme scenarios I've ever seen.
See, but correct me if I'm wrong, but this is why it's my goal with the athletes to do this, because if you're an athlete like we have and they're training very intensely, if you can get away with maintaining a lower body fat set point while also providing your body with more substrate for recovery, it's a double win. Because in athletic events, if you're a lower weight and higher relative strength, you're going to perform better. And then on top of that, if you now get more calories to recover, it seems like you're just doubling up on a good thing there.
1,000%. Not only do you just have more fuel to perform, a lot of people don't realize if your total calories are higher, your micronutrient intake is actually going up as well. So your overall metabolic health can be in a healthier place if you are staying lean. It can be super advantageous.
So how far would you bring someone down? Because sometimes the issue we run into is, hey, look, you want to jump higher, but you're fat. And you can't jump high if you're fat. You got to be lean. So how far would you bring someone down? Let's say we get a guy who comes in, he's 210. Are you just going to do my lens on this is the best type of weight loss is the slower you can do it with your deficit, the more lean muscle mass you're going to maintain, the more realistic it is probably to sustain it, because when you do those big drastic cuts, you could potentially fuck up your metabolism a little bit and drop it down.
The training they're going to be doing is so intense, and if we get an athlete that's has a high body fat, how would you juggle both, like having, because that's the priority should be to get them as lean as possible, but while also juggling this very intense training?
Yeah, 100%. So in regards to how fast I would go, I don't like losing much more than 1% of their total body weight per week. So if you have someone that's 200 pounds, I want to aim for around 2 pounds of actual true weight loss per week. And that should be primarily coming from fat. The first 1 to 2 weeks, you can see a large drop in total body weight. A lot of that's just going to be water because they're entering that deficit, and that's okay. You don't have to say like, oh crap, the deficit's way too extreme, let me like start reversing them right away or anything like that. That initial drop in weight is going to definitely slow down and kind of just settle. But thereafter, you want to see like their weekly average go down at about 1% of their total body weight, and no slower than 0.5%. So it would be 1 to 2 pounds per week for that 200-pound male. And then in regards to how aggressive I get from a caloric standpoint, I basically never go lower than the athlete's weight times 10 for their calorie intake. So if you have a 210
And to be clear,
pound,
that's weight in pounds, correct?
pounds, yeah. So if you have a 210 pound athlete, I'm never putting them below 2,100 calories. And if they're actually practicing like twice a day or something, they're going to be way higher than that. I never put my clients below their body weight times 10, even if they live relatively sedentary lives. So if you guys are dealing with athletes, they should be able to get away with a higher calorie diet. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and that's because this is another question too. Is look, if you're using a MyFitnessPal or whatever, that's just probably the most common one you hear, and one of the biggest mistakes, people don't even track their calories, and that's what I keep just track it. You can't, as Hunter says, you can't manage it if you don't measure it. And I think when you start tracking it and you start getting all those metrics in and things like that, and you start pulling people down, obviously that's where you're going to see changes. But when you're using those apps, sometimes you can input the exercise, and when you add that exercise, our training, you could burn, I would suspect, with our 2 to 3 hour sessions, I don't know, 500 plus calories.
Yeah, for sure.
It's substantial. So when you're taking that into consideration, you have this 200-pound male, you're not going to take him below 2,000. You're also adding in the fact that, you train for 2 or 3 hours. How would you just replenish that 500 and put them at 2,500 at that point? And that would be your new lowest point? Or I guess, how would you kind of view that? Because, the deficit is much higher with that exercise.
Yeah, bare minimum too, because you also need to take into consideration not just the calories you're burning during the session, but what kind of energy is required to recover from the training that you did, and what kind of metabolic processes are upregulated due to the training that you had, right? So you might be familiar with post-resistance training. You're actually burning more calories throughout the day because now you need to drive more nutrients into the muscle cell, and those cells are requiring more energy. After a really high intensity interval training, that your oxygen consumption level can be higher throughout the day. So now your EPOC's going. Yeah, exactly. So you can take that into consideration too. I don't think you need to get overly caught up with all these different formulas and trying to figure out how many calories are they burning here, how many calories are they burning there, but just paying attention to their 7-day averages and what is their actual rate of loss is going to tell you if you're being too aggressive or not aggressive enough, or if you're in that sweet spot.
Yeah. How far is, and this is the last question, and I'll let Hunter take over. He has a good question after this. How far would you take someone down on that cut before you would start reverse dieting? Would you do it in this cyclic manner where you'd go, okay, we're going to go down 3 percentage points and then we're going to reverse diet, and then we're going to get on another 3 percentage points and then we're going to reverse diet? Or would you just bring someone down 20 percentage points and then reverse diet? Or would you go into the point where they're not losing weight anymore, now it's time to reverse diet?
That's a great question, man. So a lot of it with me is there's always some sort of potential plan that's kind of outlined in my mind of where I guess after doing it for 5 years, you get pretty good at predicting what might happen. So I have some sort of plan put in place, but the majority of it is based on biofeedback. So how are they responding? Are their hunger levels through the roof? How's their energy? How's their recovery? How's their performance? How's their motivation to stay on the diet? once they start losing motivation to stay in this deficit, once hunger really starts to increase, if performance starts to drop, that's when I might diet break them. So that can be 1 to 3 weeks of eating at theoretical maintenance. The goal is no longer weight loss. You can consider it a reverse diet or not. It's not like I'm slowly adding calories in. I might add in like 300 or 500 calories in right away, have them maintain that for 1 to 3 weeks, and then boom, let's get back into the deficit because you still have more fat to lose.
So you would only reverse diet after they get down
Yes.
to that set point where you're like, look, you're 7%. Like for our guys, honestly, we want as low as you possibly can stomach. Like I probably walk around at 9%. Isaiah's probably pretty similar, 8 or 9. That would be via DEXA, bod pod. I've had it done. Calipers, I don't really believe in, but everyone's like, there's no way like you're 8% or 9%. I'm like, I have multiple measures like across like several. It's because my arms, I carry most of my adipose tissue in my midsection. So my low back, my sides, and my belly. And I think because I'm not like shredded there, you know what I mean? People are like, oh, well, you must not. But my arms are 1 or 2%, like literally via DEXA. They're, you know, I'm super vascular. So that's kind of irrelevant. But the point being, we want to bring us guys like me and Isaiah lighter the better. You know, it's mass specific force. So the lighter we are, the higher we're going to jump, the faster we're going to run, assuming that our force output goes up. And we're good at measuring the force output. That's easy. Like that's not hard for us. But realistically, how would you approach that kind of conundrum of, okay, we can take a hit on performance a little bit. When do I do that? How far should I take someone down? Or is it really just, again, you go back to the feedback thing?
It's typically going back to the feedback, and just kind of knowing like, temporary detriment in performance is okay because you know it's not long term. So if that weight loss goal is a little bit more important at this very point in time than like their current performance goal, then that's fine. Like let's take a couple steps back from the performance perspective because we know it's actually going to be like a launch pad to move forward. Because you said the leaner the better, and they're going to be able to essentially be lighter and quicker and more agile, whatever it may be. Cool.
Yeah. The only other downside is pulled muscles. That's the biggest thing I see. As soon as guys start cutting down calories and they try to jump, that's the first place issues kind of arise. Because you can kind of jump high if you just give yourself a shit ton of stimulants. You can kind of get away with it. Like you taking a good carbohydrate meal the day before, you taking a bunch of caffeine, and you have some adrenaline. You don't train for a couple of days, like the deload itself and those variables, you're pretty much foolproof. You're going to jump high. You're going to perform well, you know? But I think like where the issues would arise would be in the injury prevention type of things. You know, you see more tendinopathies. You're going to see more issues. I mean, again, it's muscle pulls is the biggest one I've seen, being the biggest issue. So I don't know how you would, it's kind of too late if you're using that as your feedback.
No, it's definitely like, too late.
Well, it's too late. You know, you knew you were too low. Or maybe you just don't do high risk.
Yeah, I think a part of that too is, aside from like the deficit and being lean, I think part of that is not taking the best like warm up protocols and doing like.
Yeah, this would be like hour-long warm-up, full dynamic flexibility, sprint drills, like isometrics for the tendon, like everything.
And it still happens.
Literally firing everything, and they would still happen. Just because, I mean, jumping, especially off one leg or sprinting, and I don't know how familiar you are with the kinematics and kinetics, like sprinting, you're looking at 6 times body weight on a single leg and 80 milliseconds at upright sprinting. Jumping, you're seeing single leg takeoffs. High jump, you're seeing 13 times body weight, you know, in terms of newtons. So if you're a 70 kilogram athlete, you're seeing, what is that, like 7,000 newtons like or something like that, and at peak forces, or plus that you might see 8,000 newtons at peak forces. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy high on a single leg. So, you know, when you have that type of kinetics internally, you look at the muscle, you know, you're seeing insane intramuscular forces, higher intramuscular forces. So, you know, if you had a tensiometer or something in there, and I think it's just like, no matter how much you warm up, like it could still happen, you know, if you're not really at that adequate level. So my kind of view on it is, look, let's pull out. You're not going to hurt yourself lifting, probably. You're not going to pull a muscle lifting. Like odds are, I've never had guys pull hamstrings lifting unless they do Nordics, where they go to the very bottom and they're not ready for it or something like that, or super hard eccentric work. So maybe it's like, hey, pull away the stuff that you know is high risk during this period of time where you're trying to be in a deficit. Because you'll hear like athletes will lose weight in season, but you should be doing that
100%,
prior to the season.
100%.
You know?
Yeah. Too many athletes lose a ton
So I don't
of
know.
weight.
What do you
too
think
many
about
athletes lose a ton of weight in their preseason because they're coming into the sport out of shape rather than coming in shape.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're losing it so aggressively that once the season starts, they're actually in a pretty, like, I don't want to say underfed, but they're not in a healthy spot to perform at their absolute best. They're kind of overworked and under-recovered because they didn't do their prep work going into it. Quick random stories, because you spoke about like body fat percentages. We had a college basketball player participate in one of our resistance training studies at UT, and he came into the lab at like 8.8% via DEXA at the start of the study. This was the greatest responder to hypertrophy we've ever seen in our lab. He gained 18 pounds of lean mass in 10 weeks and went from 8.9% body fat to like 6.2. It was
How the hell did you cheat?
No, we actually had him DEXA the following day because we didn't believe the results. We thought something was wrong. But yeah, he just totally transformed his body. Like, essentially what happened was he's a college basketball player. He obviously has like years of weight training experience. So he was able to squat twice his body weight, which was like required to be a part of the study. And like you need a certain amount of lifting experience, but he's never done like hypertrophy bodybuilding work. So he came into the lab. The study was lower body only, but outside of the lab, he was running one of my hypertrophy programs for his upper. So this guy just like essentially went from doing strength and conditioning exercises, always being underfed, to like eating properly and training like a bodybuilder, and just blew the F up. It was pretty epic.
Yeah, Eric Trexler. Epic. I'm sure you know Eric.
Yeah.
And Greg Knuckles, they were talking about Eric trained.
Quick story. They went to grad school with my brother.
Nice.
Twin brother. I'm actually good friends with Greg. And Trex is good friends with.
Yeah, they were training with some NFL athletes, and one of the NFL athletes was told, "Hey, you're gonna do an upper body," and the guy was like, "No, I can't." And they were like, "What do you mean you can't do an upper body?" He's like, "No, my biceps get too big. I can't hold the football." Yeah. And they were like, "Shut up! Like, just do 4 weeks and we'll reassess." Yeah. And I think he went from a 275 close grip for like a 3x5 to like 435 at the end of the 4 weeks. And like did his first set and yelled at the trainer, "See, I fucking told you," and grabbed the football and couldn't hold it. And it's like, I told you. It's like some people are just different. Like they're just different.
1,000%. We had someone come in and we were doing testing, and he was in the Army. I think he played football at some point. Everyone's doing testing, AMRAP testing. I think we're trying to find 10RM. So a lot of people are doing like, some people are like 185, some people are 225. Some really strong people are doing 275. This one guy puts on 315 and does like 10 pretty easily, and then like puts on 365 and like cranks out another 10. We're like, what? Like the guy's body weight was 190 pounds. I'm like, what? Yeah,
no way.
Dude.
Was his bench like 2 inches?
No. There's just some freaks out there too. And like when I was at Stony Brook for my athletic training in my undergrad, some of those D1 college football players are just fucking freaks, man. Like complete freaks of nature. And I can see like someone's bench press going from whatever you said, 275 to 430 in like 4 weeks. Like, yeah, I've just seen some real freaks of nature. It kind of makes no sense to some people, but they're just like the best outliers in the world.
There's a guy on YouTube, if you guys search him, he is UF Powerlifter. I don't know if you guys ever seen him.
Oh, is it T? Is his name T, Isaiah?
But his name's UF Powerlifter, and he's this Asian guy. He's like 150 pounds, and he'll bench like 355 for reps, and like he looks like a twig, like it doesn't look like he could bench anything. But yeah, UF Powerlifter, if you guys look him up, is insane.
That was a kid at Northern named Ronnie. I think his name, I can't remember his last name, but his name was Ronnie, and he would literally do the same thing. Like literally probably 135 pounds, and I think he had the floor, like powerlifting's huge in Florida, I think, isn't it? Down here. Like weightlifting and powerlifting. There's like a weird sport where it's like powerlifting and weightlifting mixed together. It's like clean with bench press or something, right?
I actually did that in high school. They do clean and jerk and bench press. They take the snatch out of there.
It's like the weirdest thing ever. We'd have so many athletes from Florida come to Northern and stuff, and this one kid, Ronnie, had the record for his like weight class or whatever. His bench was like three something. It was
insane.
absurd. And he was
Yeah.
super small, like literally like 120 pounds, like in a super light weightlifting class, and just super, super powerful, super strong guy. Yeah.
There's
Dudes
some
are built
freaks out
different.
there.
I'm not one of them. Isaiah might be. But Hunter, I know we're getting close to that 12 o'clock mark, but you have a couple other questions, I'm sure. I got a lot of the answers I needed, you know. I really just sucked all the knowledge from Chris's pronoun.
One thing that I kind of want to cover, are there any, I think you said earlier you need like the foundation set. What would you say the foundations are? Like if there was something, if you had somebody that completely didn't do anything like with nutrition, what would you say is things that they have to like get done day to day?
For athletes, like a
yeah,
basketball
yeah,
player or
for
something like that?
yeah, for someone like
You're trying to get your vertical
jump
to
as high as
50 and
possible.
Yeah, Isaiah's actually going. Isaiah's trying to hit that big 5-0. So
Let's get it.
Isaiah's trying
Let's
to take
get
care
it.
of all the big rocks.
He's close. We need 2 inches.
Yeah, man.
That's what she said.
In regards to like just some foundational stuff that you should definitely pay attention to, absolutely making sure that you're having adequate amount of protein on a daily basis. I like using higher protein intakes than generally recommended. Since you guys are really lean, that 1 gram per pound is actually pretty darn good for you athletes, because that's giving you more than 1 gram per pound of lean body mass. So that's pretty darn good for you guys. Making sure your calories are in a good spot. And then, pre and post workout nutrition, the stuff that we spoke about earlier on this call, that kind of all comes into play. And then depending on what you're doing from a training perspective, just actually monitoring it and giving yourself an objective way to progress over time. So many people just go into the gym and they do good workouts, like they have good sessions from session to session, but they don't actually have a plan in place to ensure that what they're doing this time is somewhat better than what they did last time, and that they're progressing week to week, month to month, meso to meso. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
We're all smiling
that's what
here
you
because
guys
that's
do,
like
right?
that's literally what we
It's
do.
just, it cracks me up. I remember in college, after I stopped playing baseball, I got into like this, all right, I'm going to do everything they wouldn't let me do in baseball.
Yeah.
Like mainly heavy bench press. I remember going into the gym and I couldn't get 225. And by the end of like year 2, I had gotten to like a 325 for 4 reps. But seeing everyone else around me who I had initially gone into the gym, be like, God, how is this kid doing 255 on bench? But at the end of year 2 or 3,
Are you familiar with
he was
progressive
still
overload?
255 on bench. And they'd be like, how did you, like, what, how'd you get there? I'm like, well, do you write down your workouts? Do you track your workouts? Do you have any idea what you did last week?
Yeah.
And so, one thing I wanted to add though, Chris, is sleep. I think like sleep is often under talked about, especially with athletes. But I think for a lot of our athletes, like maximizing the sleep quality is very important as well for recovery. So I always tell big rocks or, that peri-workout nutrition, sleep, overall nutrition. And if you have those 3, then we can start diving into like maybe some supplements.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I like to do to maximize my sleep with food? Just eat a shit ton of super high glycemic food, like maybe like cinnamon toast crunch, maybe like 2,000 calories before bed. You know what I mean? And then get that big insulin spike and just crash. What do you think about that?
It hurts
That
me
can be
every
a
time.
strategy. That can be a strategy. Pass you out.
It's something. It's something.
Yeah.
But
A gallon of warm milk.
But anyway, Chris, I know that we're kind of running up on, I hate to dive into a whole new topic. We'd love to have you back. I'd love to talk more about the supplementation side for athletes, because I know that that's an area of high interest for a lot of our athletes in terms of not only the big ones like creatine, multivitamin, fish oil, but also, how you would strategically use caffeine, what you see in the research on collagen usage. I know that that's a lot of things that our athletes really care about. And so I know that's a whole nother conversation. So we'd love to have you back on.
Sure, man.
If you want, kind of dive into that some more.
Yeah, that would be cool. And
Yeah, hopefully.
also, you guys, one of my buddies, one of my colleagues, Jacob Rauch, he might be a great person for you guys to reach out to. He's worked with the Yankees. He currently works for P3. We've done plenty of research together at University of Tampa. We both went there. So, yeah, he's with P3 right now in Cali, and then he was just at their Atlanta facility this past week. So he's just a wealth of knowledge. And you guys are familiar with Tim Gabbett, right? right?
Yeah,
He's
I'm familiar
he's
with
a
him.
sports
I'd have
scientist.
to dive into the details
but
right now.
I
but
feel
yeah.
like Jacob Rauch, like, is one of my buddies. I feel like he's going to be like the next big sports scientist.
Oh, we'd love to have him on.
He's doing some really cool research.
Yeah, is he working with P3. I love P3.
Yeah.
I love what they do. It's crazy. 3D motion analysis synchronized with force plate data. That's the goal. That's the gold standard.
He
right
just
there.
published a pretty recent paper towards the end of 2020. It was pretty phenomenal. If you guys want to geek out on it, I'm going to pull it up super quick so you can I can
Absolutely
read the title to you. But it's actually an NBA players and different jump mechanics. So it sounds like it's right up your alley.
Oh,
let's go.
Please send me this.
Yeah.
I'll just dive into that and read it every day.
You guys
for like
will
a
geek
month.
out on this. So the title of the study is Different Movement Strategies in Counter Movement Jump Amongst a Large Cohort of NBA Players. He basically categorized these players into different clusters from like a statistical point. So he had people called stiff flexors, hyperflexors, or hip flexors. So he was looking at their jump mechanics, looking at the ankle, knee, and hip, and he basically split up these different cohorts based on their jump mechanics and characteristics. So yeah, I'll send you that link right now. You guys will really geek out over it.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's literally, I don't know how familiar you are with our podcast at all, but it is probably my biggest interest is the biomechanics of jumping. That's why I love P3 and what they do. I'll definitely want to connect with him and just, try to get as many pieces of gems from him as I can. But that is what I do, is looking at tendon stiffness, why people move the way they do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like you can know that, but do you know why they move the way they do? Like, can you break it down? And I'm sure that dives into like, this guy has this RFD capacity and he has this type of movement strategy, and it's probably because of this reason. So I'm super excited to
That'll be a
dive
great
into that.
Thank
That's
you so much,
awesome.
Chris. I appreciate it. And then before we sign off, you want to tell everyone how they can find you if they want to get in touch?
For sure, man. So in regards to getting in touch with me, Instagram is a really easy way. My handle is just my full name, so it's at Christopher.Barakat, and then the website where you'll find the most amount of educational content and stuff I'm working on is www.schoolofgains.com, and Gains is spelled with a Z.
I was gonna ask you if it was with a Z.
Absolutely.
That's
Gains
awesome.
is with a Z, baby. And yeah, you'll find like nutritional content, training content, mainly on obviously bodybuilding focused stuff, physique enhancement stuff. But the nutrition stuff can absolutely be applied to just maximizing performance and recovery for everybody.
And I'll vouch for Christopher's training. It's so fun. Your hypertrophy training is so fun.
Thanks, my man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on,
pleasure.
Chris. We really appreciate you taking time to do that. As always, guys, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube, on Apple, on Spotify. If you're looking for Chris, you can go to his Instagram, like you said, shoot him a DM, whatever else. And we will catch you guys on tomorrow's episode.